Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for joining today to the book launch of Smarketing, Sell Smarter, Not Harder by Peter Strohkorb. So great to have you all with us today. It's great to see the international attendees from everywhere, as Peter just described, from Africa to Stockholm to Wokingham in the UK. You're all very welcome. So I'm calling in from Dublin, Ireland, and the weather here is cold and dry with outbreaks of COVID, and the forecast is for further outbreaks of COVID, as I'm sure it is everywhere. So it's going to get better, folks. So let's introduce you to the author, Peter. Peter has extensive experience in sales and marketing. He started his own companies and working in his own companies for about 10 years, then made the jump to corporate enterprise to see what that's like, as I guess one has to. 20 years in that space, working in multinational technology companies like Sony, 3M, DXC, Canon. So a lot of the big multinationals that are out there that resonate with everyone. And I think Peter then realized he was ready for a change, given the fact that what he was seeing between the alignment or probable misalignment of sales and marketing, and he wanted to set out on a journey to address that, make it better, and make it easier for people to work together and have the obvious results that come from that in terms of added benefits to the company, increased revenue that I spoke about, etc. So let's see what Peter has to say about his new book. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Sean. Thanks for the intro. And I'll start now. So this is what Sean looks like. And we, like I said, we will have a panel session. So what we've done there is we've put some quite senior sales and industry leaders together to give us a bit of an impression of their personal experience in regards to the book. So I don't want to. So this is just so that I don't just talk about myself in the book. You actually have some variety, and you get something out of it yourself because you can actually ask the panel tricky questions, and I'll be part of the panel as well. So think of in terms of from the panel discussion. All right, so let's talk about marketing. So why did I start writing the book? Well, as Sean explained, I've been working in multinational organizations, quite a few of them, and it didn't really matter whether they were Japanese or American or Australian. I always found that the larger the organization, the larger there was a gap between sales and marketing teams. And it had really quite unpleasant consequences, where this being a very prescriptive picture of what I experienced, namely that sales was talking to the customers and marketing was talking to the customers, but they just weren't talking to each other. And when that happens, then the messages can get very mixed, and in the end, you end up confusing the customer, which is probably the worst thing that can happen. Because as the saying goes, a confused mind says no, and the customer might just go, well, this doesn't sound right to me. I'm going to take my business elsewhere, and so it actually has a detrimental effect on the business itself. So if we then look at the all of the consequences and the symptoms of poor sales and marketing collaboration, then you can just have a look at them here. I've got 10 of them here for you enumerated. I don't need to read them out to you. You can read them by yourself, but these are all consequences of sales and marketing not working together well. Now, if you were to flip that around, if you get sales and marketing working together well, then you turn all these negatives into a positive. So for example, let's take number 8 there. The us versus them attitude creates an unattractive work environment, and high quality talent may decide to take their talent elsewhere because they would want to work in an environment where they're being supported, where success comes easy, and where there's no finger pointing and backstabbing. So the consequences of poor sales and marketing collaboration are not only financial; they're also cultural and in terms of the customer experience and in terms of the employee experience. All right. So they are quite numerous. Now, when I wrote the book, I started out looking at why is this problem, and I found that it's almost ubiquitous. And one of my clients in Australia gave me this great line. He said, there's a gap between sales and marketing. The larger the organization, the larger the gap. And it's really what I found true, that the multinational companies are the worst, particularly when the marketing team sits in a different building, in a different state of the same country, in a different country, on a different continent. The gap becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and you find that whatever they dream up in the US head office might not suit you in, say, Australia or New Zealand or in Kenya, for that matter. Right? So what I did then was I had a look around. I did some desk research for about 6 months, and because I thought, if this is such a ubiquitous problem, there must be a common solution to it. And I found none. Then I reached out to somebody called Neil Rackham, and some of you may recognize that name. So Neil Rackham is the inventor of spin selling. He took a very methodical approach to finding out what makes a good salesperson good. And he is a legend in the selling industry. He's an industry veteran. And I thought, if anybody knows, then Neil will know. So I reached out to him, and he was kind enough to respond to me. And he in fact said, there are none. He said, and I'll give you this quote a bit later on, but he said that there is nothing out there besides the CEO saying to the head of sales and to the head of marketing, guys, just communicate better. Right? So I then thought, big problem, ubiquitous problem, common problem, no solution, opportunity. and I created what I ended up calling the one team method for obvious reasons, because I wanted sales and marketing to get together as become one team. So this second, and the first book was called the one team method, and it was aimed at marketing people, and I thought that marketing people would rally to the cause and say, yes, we want to be recognized as helping sales more, and therefore we will be championing this one team method. And I found that it wasn't so. So the second book, Smarketing, Sell Smarter, Not Harder, is aimed at business leaders, C-level executives, and at sales leaders. And it talks about how, particularly now, in this day and age, in this particular sales environment, we need to sell smarter, not harder. So I'm planning a talk right now with Alice Hyman, who you might recognize from the Miller Hyman Institute, that we're going to talk about why the old ways of selling are dead, and you need to start selling more smarter and not harder. So that's a different subject. So why this book? The book goes beyond saying why we need marketing and why we need sales and marketing alignment. I think we're all pretty clear on why it's a good idea. And in fact, people have been saying it for a number of years. I think 15 years ago was when Neil Rackham and Peter Drucker wrote their paper on called Ending the War between Sales and Marketing. Now, there are lots more terms you could use to describe the relationship between two parties, but they chose the strongest possible term. They called it a war between sales and marketing. And I think 15 years later, nothing much has changed, despite all the technology and all the marketing automation and sales automation. So the book will not only talk about why it makes sense, but it describes exactly how you go about starting the conversation, introducing it into an organization, and making sure that the people become part of the solution and don't remain part of the problem. Then it talks about who needs to be involved to make it sustainable, and what you can do to make it sustain in the long term, so that it doesn't rely on the heroic efforts of certain individuals who, when they leave, the whole thing falls over. Yeah. So the book answers all these questions. Now, let me just say that it's not just me that says that sales and marketing misalignment is a problem. So in 2016, there was a LinkedIn report, and it actually put a dollar value on the misalignment. And it said in the US alone, every year, $1 trillion is wasted because of misalignment, because of double handling and things falling between the cracks, and the salespeople writing their own content, the marketing content being ignored and not being used, the customers being confused, all these things that we talked about that can go wrong in the 10 symptoms that I showed earlier, cost in the US alone $1 trillion every year, according to LinkedIn. So it is a substantial problem. In 2014, my organization undertook research into 185 B2B organizations. And what we did was we separated out the marketing people from the salespeople, and we asked them the same set of questions. And it turned out that in organizations that had poor sales and marketing alignment, the organization was almost twice as likely to suffer financially than the ones where they had their sales and marketing aligned pretty well. So let me just say this again. The difference wasn't just 10% or 20%. If you're an organization that has not a good alignment between your sales and marketing teams, you are twice as likely to suffer financially compared to an organization that has its alignment in place. That's significant as well. So we've talked about all the negatives and what we don't want. I now would like to flip it around and talk about what's in it for you if you actually get interested in this and if you bring this into your organization. So we want to get away from this little picture on the left-hand side that I showed earlier, and we want to get to this thing that I call a virtuous cycle of collaboration. And what do I mean by that? So what do I mean by that is that the salespeople are talking to the customers through their day-to-day sales engagements. And marketing is providing customers with insight, information, collateral, say through the website, through newsletters, through social media, through online advertising. So both parties actually interact to some degree, in some way, with the customer. Now, if we can overcome this communication barrier and if we get them to talk to each other, how useful would it be for sales to pass on to marketing which of the collateral that they put out actually works for having a sales conversation with a customer? So if all it takes is for salespeople to go back into marketing and say, I just met with the CIO and they really like this brochure, or they really like this white paper, or they like the white paper because of this, right? Now, marketing can take that information and say, wow, okay, that works for the salespeople. We'll do more of that. And we'll stop doing stuff that nobody cares about or nobody really values. So sales can actually help marketing to do a better job for sales, if only they talk to each other. Equally, the information, the collateral, the content that marketing puts out into the market and the customers talk to the salespeople about, it would be really interesting to hear back from sales what the customers value in terms of the marketing collateral as well. So the corollary is that if sales and marketing work well together, everybody wins. Marketing wins because they can do a better job to produce more sales and get recognized for it for a change. Sales wins because they can produce more sales with the customers, get more loyal customers, more repeat business, and more on-sell and upsell business. And last but not least, let's not forget the customer will benefit because they get a more pleasant buying experience because everybody's on the same page and says the same thing and gives them the same information and they don't get confused. All right. So I hope that makes sense. Can you nod? Because I can see you.
Peter, just one thing.
Yep.
There's a grayness around your screen, which is blocking out some of the content.
Oh, okay. Is that this thing up here? Hold on. Is that better? Oh, you're talking about the pictures.
Yeah, you've got rid of a little bit of it. That's it. And the top bit.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a feature of Zoom. So if I minimize it like that, will that be better?
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, well, we can see most of it.
Okay, cool. Okay. So let's talk about the positive impacts of sales and marketing alignment. So there's 4 categories we can split them up into, namely financial, obviously, strategic, operational, and cultural. And I don't need to read out those bullet points to you individually. You can have a look yourself. But I think you can tell that just by bringing sales and marketing into alignment, getting on the same page and making them work together, opens up a whole bunch of benefits that impact the organization and its staff and its customers. Now, we've got Donal Daly here. And Donal, do you mind if I get you to talk to these points here? Would that be all right? I haven't, I'm ambushing you a little bit, but if you feel up to it, if you don't mind, because you're the author.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a while since I did this, but I think the numbers are just huge and I think the essence of it is when sales and marketing align around the customer and they end up focusing on what the customer wants to solve, and they both kind of start at that position, then I think that drives an awful lot of activity. And the shorter sales cycle, the win rate, the more revenue, the profit are the areas that I think most people care about. Because what tends to happen is when they're not aligned, as you have said, is when they're not aligned, the productivity goes down. Your 1 trillion number that you mentioned on LinkedIn actually there was a previous study that I did just before this one, which put that at a $1.223 trillion cost of people going to wrong meetings because of sales and marketing alignment. Yes. Just purely in terms of lost productivity. So I've always had a thing I used to talk about in my Altify days, which is thinking about that the impact on the customer of a bad buying decision is typically greater than the impact on the salesperson of a lost deal. Ooh, right? So when you think about that is if the marketing people market the wrong thing to the customer, or the salesperson sells the wrong thing, then the customer ends up being the person who suffers the most. So with sales and marketing aligned, then it becomes a natural thing for the customer to do, to buy what the seller is selling. Yeah. And that's what tends to happen.
Yeah, thanks, Donal. So we should say that Donal used to be the CEO and founder of Altify, so that's why I put him on the spot here. And thank you for picking up the baton.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
But I think we can all agree that the numbers that on the screen here are significant. Just pick any single one of them, and you would wish you had those in your business, wouldn't you? All right. So I promised I was going to show you a bit of what Neil said, and you can read that on the screen there yourself. He pretty much said that the one team method and Smarketing tackles the problem in a simple but not simplistic way. And we know that keeping it simple is a good thing, so we didn't want to make it complicated. But the thing that really got me is that an international industry legend like Neil saying this about the book and about the one team method in Smarketing is just tickling me pink, because if there's hardly any greater authority than him to know whether there is another method out there or not. So I'm very proud of myself, even if I say so myself. So
well done, Peter.
The last 2 things I was going to show you is 2 actual case studies, just as Sean suggested, and they're 2 quite different case studies. So this is Brent Clark. He's the CEO of Whatblock, which is an energy efficiency advisory company. And when I met him, he had a sales team that was in one part of the country and a marketing team that was in another part of the country. And they talked to each other, but didn't believe each other. So for example, when marketing said, look, this is your price list, go out and sell, the salespeople said, we don't think we can charge those prices. And so the relationship was a bit strained for that reason, because marketing was trying to do a good job for the salespeople, and the salespeople were just resisting what they're getting. And over time they drifted apart. So when I met Brent, he was in a bit of strife because it was only a 2-year-old startup at the time. His financiers were getting a bit itchy, a bit nervous about the lack of revenue coming in and the sales targets not being met. And his own seat, Brent's own seat, was a bit shaky at the time. So we worked together on the sales and marketing alignment. And because it was only a small company at the time, it went quite quickly to align the two. And here is what he said after us working together on aligning the sales and marketing teams. And he said not only did they improve their margins and move into a high customer segment where the margins are higher, but the key for me, the key sentence for me was that they were able to record the same sales revenue in 2 weeks that had previously taken them 6 months to generate. Now, this is not the norm, right? So don't expect this if we do this in your company. And they did come off a fairly small base. But what did happen was that the sales team, after the intervention, the sales team was able to generate their biggest sale ever up until that time, with very high margins to a very large customer. And so that's why the revenue jumped to that enormous degree, because they had the confidence and they had the opportunity to actually implement what marketing was giving them and to make that big sale, which rescued the whole organization, made the financiers calm down, and secured Brent Clark's seat. He's still the CEO there now, a few years later. Let's move to the other end of the spectrum. This is a $500 million national energy company. And there's Amy Charlester, who was the head of sales and marketing, who was hired after I had breakfast with the then CEO, who basically called me in because he said, look, there's something funny going on between my salespeople and my marketing people. I can't put my finger on it. Can you help me figure it out? And so we did this marketing assessment, which I'll talk about after the panel session. And his words to me were, oh my God, I had no idea how bad it is. The buck stops with me. We're going to fix this. And I was very relieved. I went, phew, because he could have easily said, no, that's all rubbish and your methodology is wrong and it can't be right. But he took it on the chin, to his great credit. And he said, we will fix this. And after just 6 months of intervention, the staff were more engaged. The customers were, the NPS score went through the roof, so they were happier and more loyal. So we decreased some of their churn. And of course, the revenue went up. And I'm very pleased for Amy that she, after the CEO moved on, she became interim CEO for a 6-month period. And after that, the board decided to make her the permanent CEO. So the head of sales and marketing that I worked with together at Momentum for a 6-month period is now the CEO of the entire organization, and she's driving the organization from strength to strength. So it just goes to show that sales and marketing alignment works in small organizations as well as large organizations. But of course, the impact is much greater in a larger organization because the margin for error is just so much greater. So I hope that gives you a bit of insight into what is achievable and what is realistically possible to be achieved. Back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Peter. So I find this fascinating, this topic. I've worked a large part of my career in large companies, 100,000 plus people. And you nail it there. But the larger the company, the larger the gap, and in a lot of cases, it's not intended. It's just the outcome, and it's the way KPIs are set, and it's the reporting structure. It's a whole litany of things. But it fascinates me also that something as obvious as this isn't addressed on a more daily basis. The amount of effort and cost that goes into a sales team and a marketing team together. And personally, what I've seen is things like ABM, account-based marketing, where you've got this, a lot of resource feeding into Salesforce. Here's a ton of leads for you that have just been sort of blindly picked out of the market. These companies must be in the market for our services just because. And it's sort of thrown over the digital fence, and it's, if they're not acted upon because the sales folks say they're not real. And then there you have your push pull, your yin yang. Marketing are doing effort, sales are pushing back, and never the twain shall meet. But it's really encouraging to think that from quite a simple viewpoint and some objectives that you can rectify this. So I mean, from my own point of view, that where I am now in Sycomp, we're much smaller, and that we're less than 400 people. That necessarily engenders more of a family community aspect, because we live and die together, from our sales, our marketing, to our engineers, to our finance. So if we don't get the sales, we don't get to get paid. If we don't have finance people working, we don't get our bills paid either by our clients. So it's something I'll ask it to the panel, but it's something that extends arguably beyond sales and marketing. Now, I know we're up against time because we're having an interesting conversation. So let me introduce the panel to you folks. First, we have Tony Wills, and Tony is country director for Canon in the UK. And Tony has amassed many years of experience in enterprise, both in the UK and across the world, in fact, including New Zealand and Australia, and lots of leadership positions in that time. And I will ask the first question to Tony on that. We also have Mark Thackeray, who is an entrepreneurial businessman with over 25 years experience. We're going to be in the thousands of years experience here, folks, across the UK, US, and internationally. And Mark has established during that time 6 companies that were profitable. Well, you established 6 companies, but they were all profitable. Okay, Mark, that's what I want to make across. So Mark's skill set would have been comprehensively understanding markets, then looking at how businesses can exploit those markets for their benefit. So something that's very crucial. Next, we have Marcus Cauchi. So Mark, with the Muppet characters in his background, described himself as a grumpy, grizzled sales veteran, his words, who's been selling for a long, long time. But the proof of that is how he's helped clients sell billions of pounds worth of additional revenue because of his trainings, which I think is fantastic, in lots of markets and in lots of segments worldwide. And Marcus is also the co-author of a book called Making Channel Sales Work, and the host of several podcasts, including the Inquisitor podcast. Last but not least, we have the aforementioned Donal Daly. I am trying to get Peter to say Donal. We will get there, Donal, don't worry. Donal is equally a serial entrepreneur, and he's founded 5 successful global companies since founding his first company in AI, artificial intelligence, back in 1986. Back, folks, when it was only in movies. Now we have it in our workplace. So that's fantastic to be at the forefront of that, Donal. And Donal also has a new venture coming up at the end of this month. I'm not sure if you're going to share something with us, Donal, but fair play, and delighted to hear that. So looking forward to this panel discussion. Again, Tony, first question for you. Tony, you as the country manager, you are responsible for all business units. So I'm really keen to hear how the sales and marketing relationships work in Canon, in your experience, and what you've done to help that, and how Peter's methodologies can further help with that.
Thanks, Sean. And firstly, congratulations on the book, Peter. Great read. Yeah, I've recently rejoined Canon after having spent some 10 years in the SME environment. I wanted to see if I could exist outside of the corporate enterprise. And having come back to Canon, a couple of things that are really relevant, and Peter's already mentioned, is that the bigger the organization, the bigger the gap. And you would think that big international organizations would have all the answers, of course, because they've got lots of resource. But my experience is that there are generally three types of companies. There are companies that are sales-led. There are companies that are marketing-led, Apple being a great example of a marketing-led company. And there are a very few companies that are Smarketing-led or marketing-enabled as such. And upon returning to Canon, my initial experience was that it was very much a sales-led company with marketing being a distant support function, and all the usual disconnects that exist in those types of environments was evident. And Peter and I have worked together in the past, and we've experienced this firsthand in a previous life. So I already had a very clear view as to what needed to be done. And Smarketing was a phrase that I hadn't heard at that stage, but certainly the sentiment I was very familiar with. So I'm pleased to say that the first and most obvious thing I did was embark upon a Smarketing journey, which is easier said than done, particularly in a larger organization where views are entrenched. And paraphrasing the war terminology, barriers, wars did exist. Everybody was bad at what they were doing because the other person wasn't doing their job properly. There wasn't much looking in the mirror stuff. But I'm pleased to say that after 12 months, your principles, Peter, and your advice has been invaluable, and we're now starting to get some really, really strong outcomes as a result of the much closer alignment. I mean, the first thing to do, obviously, is to get people to buy into the principle, and having a sound, solid strategy based on some really important principles, I think, is the first jumping off point. So if you want strong principles, then Smarketing is a good place to start. Because that gives you the foundation from which to build. And after having gone through the hearts and minds bit and compelling and convincing people that it was the right thing to do and getting their buy-in, we've started to see things accelerate quite quickly. But the first and most difficult part, I think, is getting people to move away from their entrenched positions of the past and understand that it's collaboration and cooperation that wins the day, and the customer should be at the heart of it. And from there on in, it becomes a much easier and definitely a more satisfying journey. So that's pretty much where we are at the moment, Sean. We're on a journey. We've definitely turned the corner. Alignment is much more evident than it ever was. And if you want a yardstick, look at the results, and the results are definitely improving, even in these difficult and challenging times.
Sure. And
That's
that is absolute. Yeah, no, that is great to hear. And because you have the responsibility for it, it's great to see that you can be like a vanguard or a proponent championing it. Thanks for that, Tony. Marcus, do you want to add to that?
Oh, yes.
In 5 minutes or less.
Right. Okay. So buckle up, because you're in for a barrage. Customers deserve to feel safe when they're engaging with our companies. And the problem is where you have a disconnect between marketing, sales, customer success, account growth teams, operations. The customer thinks of us as one organization. And if the handover is clunky or misdirected, then they end up suffering. As far as the customer is concerned, they are only interested in us helping them deliver the outcomes that they rent from us. If marketing and sales in particular are not completely aligned around the customer, and to build on Tony's point, having the customer at the heart of everything that we do, then we do them a monstrous disservice. And two sackable offenses are, we've always done it this way, and everyone in the industry does it this way. Anyone who says that kind of thing should be fired on the spot. They are toxic, they're dangerous, and they forget that we exist because of, not in spite of, the customer. The way most organizations are set up, the customer is an inconvenience at the end of a long chain that a vendor organization has in place. We typically, and I say we as an industry or as professions, and I use that term exceptionally loosely, what we tend to do is we see them as an afterthought. And the problem is that customers don't actually buy our products or services. They rent the outcomes. And if we are going to genuinely align with them at the heart of everything we do, the first thing we actually have to do is listen to the bloody customer. And what frustrates the living hell out of me is how infrequently marketing actually speaks to the customer, how infrequently executives speak to the customer. And sales turns up and does this word vomit of product information. And another sackable offense is turning up with a PowerPoint that has a picture of your headquarters in it. What on earth is that all about? No one cares. They don't care about you, your company, your products, your service, who your investors are, how long you've been in business. What they care about is, do you understand my problem and can you help me fix it? So if you are not completely aligned, and what that means is you actually have to speak. I'm going to cite Gong as a great example of fantastic collaboration between marketing and sales. Udi and Ryan, the CMO and the CRO, speak every day. Pre-lockdown, they used to go on half-hour to hour-long walks together to discuss the customer. And the net result of that for them is 500% per annum compound growth. I look at organizations like UiPath, where they put the customer at the heart. They've grown 100,000% in 7 years. That's what alignment does. But you cannot align just sales and marketing. You have to align around the customer. So that's my rant.
I completely agree. And it's again, it's fascinating topic that covers not just sales and marketing, but it's company wide, and it has to come from the top. Great. Thank you very much for that, Marcus. Question from Alan in the UK. It's where is that? Looking at existing businesses, but also startups. What do you typically see with the sales and marketing efforts of both of those types of companies? Mark Thackeray, could you take that question? So again, you've got experience in both, working with startups and existing businesses. Where do you see the nuanced differences there?
I think when you're building a startup, it's very passionate. People are very passionate about what they want to do. They want to grow the business, but they really vastly don't understand how to take that product to market. They think they do, but they misalign. And I think really the fundamental fact is you have to, as Marcus said, you have to look at yourself as the client, what is in it for the client and not for them as a startup business is in making more sales. So I think fundamentally startups really massively underestimate what it is to take a product to market and also drive sales. With an SME business, it's completely different in the sense of they completely understand that sales and marketing is about the difference between life and death of the business. It's about making revenues and driving revenues, and from that they can gain stability, and then from that they can actually grow their business. So it's a completely different alignment from a startup to an SME. That's why a lot of startups fail, because they don't really focus on what's important. They tend to focus on the products that they're creating or the services that they're creating versus a customer.
Right. Agree with that. Thanks, Mark. And last question coming in, Donal, we give this one to you. You've got tremendous depth of knowledge and experience in AI. How do you see the effect of that moving forward within sales and marketing in particular?
I think sales and marketing, when it's effective, it's a knowledge business. It's about, you can't sell something to a customer unless you understand what their problems are. you should be able to go to a customer and go, oh, I understand who you are, and other companies like you have these kind of problems. It's a bit like when you go on Amazon to buy something and it says, people who bought this also bought this, right? You should be able to apply your knowledge to go to the customer and say, people who have these problems also have these problems. Is this something that's relevant? That's hard to do on scale. It's particularly hard to do when a company continually brings on new sales reps or new marketing people, and people companies tend to spend their time training people on how to sell or how to market, as opposed to how to understand their customers' problems. And in knowledge intensive industries, as most are now, then technology has a role to play to enable the sales and our marketing person to be a knowledge expert in their customer's business, which makes them more effective. And AI has been doing that for a long time. I've always kind of defined AI as being a way of bringing expert knowledge to non-experts, which is what we need to do as we bring salespeople to the customer. So that's the point, Sean.
I think that's fascinating, because it's a long way from 1986, where it was, as I said, in sci-fi movies, to being in Salesforce and to being in your home at your fingertips with the likes of, I can't say the A word because she's behind me, but that sort of immersive technology. So thanks for that, Donal. Okay, let's go back to Peter.
If I say Alexa hard enough, will it screw up your life there? Right?
Yeah, pretty much. How can I help?
Yeah. Just a point, Sean, I will make, just as you mentioned it. I used to be in the business, and for a long time, of saying nothing happens until someone sells something, right? Which is kind of true, right? Which was the business I was in for 15 years. And now I would say nothing bad happens until someone buys something, right? And I say that because now the customer is the planet, right? And that's the new business that I mentioned. And it's about being the salesperson has to be really considered about what they're asking the customer to buy, because when people buy better, then we have less impact on the planet. And so anyway, so I'm building a new tech company around how to help companies grow without screwing up the planet. And by the way, I'm hiring all sorts of people, so people should call me.
A worthy one, and also something that we look forward to hearing about. So thanks for that, Donal. So Peter, we have 7 minutes left, so it's back to you to talk about, in particular, where you've had success with a client, and I really want to hear about this giveaway, this special offer. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Sean. So the success stories, I've already covered 2 of those. If you want to hear more, please do reach out to me offline, and I'm happy to discuss your individual businesses with you as well. So everybody, as you know, will receive a copy of the book, your own personal copy, as a soft copy. But my door is also open to have a conversation with you about your business. So something that Tony said struck me, and he said was that the hardest thing is actually to get everybody talking about sales and marketing alignment. You know, to get people from rolling their eyes, going, oh, it is what it is. We can't do anything about it. It's always been this way. You know, we like Marcus said, we've always done it this way. The hardest thing is to get an internal dialogue started in terms of how can we do better, particularly in large organizations when you're used to going, sales, you're just too lazy to follow up the leads, and no, marketing, your leads are no good, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer five free Smarketing assessments. Now, the Smarketing assessments are actually there to help you, firstly, get an impartial picture of the state of your sales and marketing alignment. You will get your own Smarketing score. So you can see that on the screen here. So you've got 3 maturity stages in terms of Smarketing. So you got your silo mindset, where they exist, sales and marketing exist in separate silos and pretty much don't talk to each other. The process mindset, where they plug that gap with some technology, CRM, Salesforce automation, marketing automation, but it's really just relying on processes, not people. And then the collaboration mindset where actually sales and marketing act like one. And I've signified that here through the yin and yang symbol, whereby they're almost indistinguishable from the outside looking in, although we know that marketing has a different skill set to sales and they need to just come together and work together. So how does it work? There are 5 steps to what I've called here Smarketing Nirvana. And the first thing that the way it starts out is just with a quick, inexpensive benchmarking test, giving you your Smarketing score, and then presenting that to your executive team, so they at least know what's going on behind the curtain, right? And I call that the pulse of our business. Now, I'm going to talk some more about this in a minute, and I'm going to give 5 of these away to approved clients. So I'm not going to give them away to the first 5 people putting their hand up. I'm asking you to come to me and talk to me about your organization, and I will see whether it's applicable to you, whether it's actually useful to you, and then how we can get it started. So it's a much more sophisticated way of making this this offer than just saying, "Oh, first 5 people stick your hand up." So the 5 steps are: we take a quick benchmarking score just to baseline everything and to understand where we're actually starting from today. Then we ask the question, why is it so? Why do we get this score? And I'll talk about it in a minute. And we take the internal sentiments of your own people. So my organization comes into your organization as Switzerland, as a neutral entity, and we actually interview your salespeople and your marketing people from the most senior to the most junior and get their sentiments. And I tell you now, the gold that comes out of these conversations is just phenomenal, because often the people at the coalface who experience firsthand all the things that are wrong also often have the best ideas in terms of how to address and solve them, but they don't often feel empowered to speak out and make themselves known and their ideas known. So we bring all that out of the organization, we collate it all and we present it to you. Now, we've talked about sales and marketing alignment, but we also said that the third party, and probably the most important party in that triangle, is the customer. So it would be very remiss of ourselves to just focus internally on the organization and to the exclusion of the customer. So what we want to do is we want to repeat that exercise in terms of taking the sentiment of the customer, taking the sentiment of the sales and marketing people. We also want to extend that to the sentiment of the customer. So we go out to your customer organization and we say, how do you perceive this organization in terms of their sales and their marketing activities, their consistency of their messaging and so on. And again, because we're Switzerland, they don't have a relationship with us. They can tell us what they like and we won't take offense. They actually go, blah, and they tell us what they really think. And that information is gold to bring back again under point 4 here, and to take all that information and to construct an agreed action plan. Now, the key to it all, as I said quite early on, is if we can change the sentiment from finger pointing, your fault, my fault, you know, the dog ate my homework, to saying what would actually happen if we did better? What would happen to the organization? What would happen to me personally? What would happen to my department? What would happen to my people? What would happen to the customer? And then take the information that we've got out of the internal people and the external customers and actually make use of that. Then everybody feels that they have contributed something to the plan, and we can agree to an action plan together. And to implement the plan then is really easy because everybody's already agreed to doing it. We don't need to now push the plan through the organization to get it executed. So this is kind of taking a leaf out of the Japanese company culture, where they take a long time to create a plan, but then because everybody's on board, when they have the plan, then they implement it very quickly. As opposed to Western culture, where the hierarchy decides on the plan and then pushes it down into the organization, often meeting active or even passive resistance. So those are the 5 steps to Smarketing Nirvana. This is the one team method. Let's talk again about step 1, which is the one I'm going to give away. So here's a real example of what you're getting if we agree that it's the right thing for you to do. Firstly, you get your own corporate-wide Smarketing score. So this sample organization, by the way, this is a real example from a real customer. They are in the process mindset maturity stage. And that's borne out in the fact that their average score on the marketing side is 73 out of 100 points, on the sales side 45 out of 100. And by the way, marketing always rates the collaboration higher than sales does. It's just phenomenal how that's about, the ratio is about the same too. It's almost twice as marketing is rating itself, the collaboration, twice as highly as sales. But then it gets really interesting if you look at the individual scores and you just look at the highest score versus the lowest score. So this is one individual on the marketing side has said, no, we're actually doing really well. We got 78 out of 100 for me. Interestingly, somebody on the sales side said the same thing, 80 out of 100, which makes me think that these people have built a personal relationship that allows them to live collaboration between sales and marketing on an individual level. So they probably go out to lunch together, or they have some sort of, communication that goes on, and the feedback works for these two people, but not for the whole organization, which is signified by the fact that we've got an individual on the marketing side that says we're only at 65 out of 100 in terms of collaboration. And on the sales side, even worse, they say that's only 20%, 20 points out of 100. So obviously you can see that this is not organization-wide, this collaboration, that there's actually gulfs there, but some people have managed to create a bridge between the two. The next thing that is in it for you, if you go through this exercise, is that you will get the top 5 opportunities as voted by the marketing team and as voted by the sales team. So it comes from the horse's mouth. They're saying, we wish we would have these things in place. And you can just have a look at what they are in this real client example here. And wouldn't it make sense that marketing wants to have a better understanding of what marketing material is used by the high performing salespeople? Simply because then they can go and say, why do you use that material, and how can we help the other guys use that as well? Imagine what impact that would have on the business. Or making a dedicated person responsible for improving the sales and marketing collaboration, so it's not just relying on teams doing the right thing, but there's actually somebody who's empowered and whose goal with making the collaboration last and stick. Now, this benchmarking, Altify business benchmarking exercise is usually $2,000, but I'm going to give, like I said, 5 of these away. But I need you to come to me after the launch and apply for it, and we'll have a chat, an open chat about why it should be you and how it could be useful for you. And last not least, I've put my contact details on the screen here, so you can just take a screenshot, or you find me, because my last name is not that common, so you'll find me online. And please feel free to reach out to me and connect with me on LinkedIn if you like as well. But the idea is that everybody will get a copy of the book after this, probably tomorrow, because it's already in the evening here for me in Australia. And I will also remind you of this offer and give you some more information about it in an email the next day or so, right? So I would like you to consider whether your organization is the right one to have this benchmarking study undertaken to understand where you sit on the maturity score curve, and what would happen if you actually implemented some of the things we've been talking about today. Over to you, Sean.
Great, thanks, Peter. I'm conscious we've run over time, so folks, I think we could talk for hours more. It's a really it is a topic that's really, really important, though. That is the thing. So we can always have a follow-up with this. But thank you, Peter. Yeah, that brings us to the close of the event. So as Peter says, reach out in terms of the special offer. Email Peter for the link to this recording of today, and also to get the book. because it's well worth a read. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you to Peter, and you know, good luck and success on your book. Thanks to our panel for contributing on the Q&A, and thanks to the folks who attended. It's great to see you from all across Europe, and thanks again for joining. So folks, have a great day, be successful, take care and stay safe.